Have you ever seen those structures that they found under the ocean outside of Japan?
No.
Fascinating. It looks like some ancient structure that was under the ocean a long time ago. Look at that. There's corridors and steps. Talking about space, about how we know more about space than we do about the ocean. Those underwater listening devices were most likely so that they could hear UFOs moving around.
Neptune 1 ventured to the deep waters near the coastal city of Hyrule. The team uncovered a thriving marine ecosystem, reclaiming an area shaped by volcanic eruptions millions of years ago, creating unique adaptations in the species that now inhabit these waters.
The potential for extraterrestrial life. Now, what exactly do I mean by this specifically? Well, here's the thing. NASA believes that a lot of Earth's oceans actually came from asteroids that crashed into our planet billions of years ago. How do they know this? Well, the chemical composition of ocean water is quite similar to some of the oldest meteorites in the solar system. So it's plausible that the water we're swimming in now was delivered to us by asteroids billions of years ago. But it gets stranger. When these space rocks collided with Earth, they didn't just bring water, they also brought organic material that's been evolving in our oceans ever since. These materials might even be part of what gave rise to life on Earth. Now, maybe this is a stretch, but what if some of that organic material has continued to evolve in ways we're not ready for? With 95% of our oceans still unexplored, it's possible that we're not alone down there. There could be life forms lurking in the deep that have been evolving in isolation for millions of years, and NASA might want to keep that under wraps. Now let's get into the really spooky stuff. According to some rumors, NASA's 2022 Orpheus expedition may have encountered something in the deep sea, something they may not be willing to share. The mission, which was supposed to study the ocean depths for insights into space exploration, was actually looking in the Hadal Zone, the deepest area of the ocean, but some insiders believe that the team stumbled on something unsettling. A species of massive, never-before-seen marine life that could be hiding in the most extreme depths of the Earth. The story goes that the submersible spotted a creature so huge that one of the astronauts, Garrett Reisman, described its eye as being as big as a flying saucer. This next one's pretty explosive. An underwater volcano located off the coast of Tonga. It made headlines on January 15th of 2022 with an eruption so massive it sent shockwaves around the globe. The explosion was equivalent to 15 million tons of TNT, making it one of the most powerful volcanic events ever recorded. I mean, just look at this. It doesn't look real. It looks like Zeus's wrath on the Earth. This eruption didn't just blow a ton of steam into the air, it actually reshaped the ocean floor too. The area around the volcano was altered, creating a massive cavern that reaches down about 850 meters, or about 2,788 feet down into the Earth's crust. If it continues to deepen, we could be looking at some serious geological consequences. Now, NASA and other scientific organizations monitor volcanic activity pretty closely, but there's probably a good reason why they don't rush into these hot zones. The unpredictability of underwater volcanoes makes them extremely dangerous, and they could potentially trigger devastating events like tsunamis or earthquakes. Next up, let's talk about eddies, kind of like the ocean's version of black holes. Now, we all know black holes in space are terrifying, but did you know that the deep sea has something equally creepy? What you're looking at here is a massive eddy photographed with a NASA satellite back in 2011 off the coast of South Africa. Not something you'd want to get caught up in. Eddies are massive circular currents that can swallow up pretty much everything in their path. And they're not just tiny whirlpools either. I mean, some of them are pretty small, but others, as you've just seen, can get so big you can see them from space. And once you're caught in one like that, there's no escaping. These currents can last for hours, days, or even weeks, unlike black holes, which might theoretically transport you to another dimension. An eddy's pull is much simpler. You just get sucked in and you drown. Now, NASA has investigated the deep sea to understand extreme environments, which also helps them prepare for deep space exploration. But here's where things get strange. There have been stories circulating about intelligent cephalopods in the ocean's depths. These creatures are said to have sabotaged equipment and even interacted with the submersibles exploring their territory. Now, is this all just internet rumor? I mean, some of it maybe, but cephalopods like squids and octopuses are known to be rather intelligent animals. Octopuses can be particularly crafty, and the fact that there are now known to be massive-sized squids lurking in the ocean, maybe they could be just as dangerous for underwater exploration as they were for ships sailing the sea back in the day, leading to legends of giant squids pulling sailors into the depths of the water, never to be seen again. Alright, back to alien life. We've all heard the conspiracy theories about UFOs, but have you heard the stories about alien bases hidden underwater? Take the Solomon Islands, for example, where locals have told stories for centuries about strange lights in the sky that disappear into the ocean. What could be going on there, I wonder? It's not just the Solomons either. There have been sightings of unidentified objects hovering over water all around the globe, including mysterious UFOs and glowing lights in places like Alaska and the Mediterranean. Some even claim that they're underwater alien bases. Now, NASA doesn't come out and confirm any of these stories, of course, but they've been involved in some strange underwater research, especially when it comes to studying deep sea environments. Could they know more than they're letting on? Maybe the deep sea is the perfect cover for whatever alien activities are going on beneath the surface. Could NASA be holding back info on alien life in our oceans? And look, it wouldn't be the first time the space agency has kept secrets. Of course, it's not just aliens and volcanoes lurking in the deep. The ocean is home to some of the scariest known creatures imaginable, many of which could pose a real threat to anyone exploring. Giant squids, great white sharks, they're more well known, but there's a whole list of lesser known creatures too, like the cookie cutter shark, for example, which can and has been known to take chomps out of ships. The deep sea is full of dangers like that, and there's always the possibility of running into something much bigger and far more dangerous than anything we've encountered so far. Think of it this way. In space, it's very unlikely you're gonna run into some dangerous form of life. I mean, deeper out, there's a higher chance for sure, but in the ocean, there are more immediate threats that we know of. Deep sea explorers have reported odd encounters with hostile creatures, and while some of them are definitely just internet folklore, others aren't. Like a case in 1978, when the USS Stein, a Navy ship's sonar equipment, was shredded by what they think was a massive-sized squid. This one is downright weird. NASA's discovery of a city of lights in the middle of the ocean where there's no land to be found. Back in 2012, NASA teamed up with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or the NOAA, to release a nighttime map of the Earth. Everything looked normal, except for one bizarre anomaly off the coast of Argentina. The map showed a strange cluster of lights in the middle of the ocean, and it looked like a city complete with patterns that almost resembled an arrowhead or even the Eiffel Tower. The only problem, there's no land in that area, so how could lights be shining there? NASA claimed these were just fishing boats probably, but could there be something bigger going on? Something that for whatever reason, NASA doesn't want us to know about. Well, it wouldn't make sense for me not to mention the triangles. And what do I mean by triangles? Well, I'm talking about areas in the ocean where weird, often terrifying things happen. We've all heard of the Bermuda Triangle, but did you know there are other ones, like the Michigan Triangle? These are locations known for bizarre incidents where ships, planes, and even entire vessels have been known to just vanish without a trace. The Bermuda Triangle is famous for incidents like the disappearance of Flight 19 in 1945, the USS Cyclops in 1918, and the mysterious vanishing of Flight DC-3 in 1948. And there are some spooky theories as to what's happening here. Could it just be dangerous weather? Sure, but others think there's something weirder, possibly, like electromagnetic interference messing with equipment. No one really knows for sure, but what is clear is that there are just too many unexplained disappearances to ignore. And finally, we've got an eerie story from the beaches of England. In 2011, 87 unexploded World War II bombs washed up on Calshot Beach. Now imagine walking along the beach and stumbling across dozens of old bombs. A 5-person bomb squad was sent in to handle the explosives. They cordoned off the area to keep people safe. The bombs were carefully stacked offshore during low tide, and when the tide came in, they were detonated. Luckily, no one was harmed, but it was a close call. Now, this is just one incident. There's still plenty of unexploded ordnance out there. The US government has even reported that 6 nuclear bombs went missing in the ocean, never to be found. NASA's aware of these potential threats, and it makes sense why they'd probably be cautious about venturing into the deep sea. The ocean could be hiding much more dangerous things, and when it comes to losing nukes in the water, yeah, I wouldn't blame them for wanting to steer clear of that. In the serene waters of Seljordsvannet in Telemark, Norway, there's a legend that has existed for over 2.5 centuries. The existence of a mysterious sea creature dubbed Selma. The legend of Selma has been passed down through the generations, a part of the folklore for locals of the area, but back in 2012, Selma took a step closer to reality when a 17-year-old named Lisbeth, while on a family trip, managed to capture what are hailed as some of the best images ever recorded of this creature. Possibly. During a family outing, Lisbeth captured a pretty good video. Gunvor Vefal, Lisbeth's mother, had her own encounter with Selma in 1995, and her mother saw it back in 1970. She never came out publicly at the time with her story though, thinking she'd just get laughed at. In the footage, you can see some sort of long object colliding gracefully beneath the surface of the water with approximately 40 to 50 distinct humps. It's a pretty solid piece of footage. What do you all think though? Misidentified animal or genuine sea serpent?
The anglerfish is truly a sight to make sore eyes. I mean, this thing is freaky, and so are its mating habits. You can quite easily differentiate the male anglerfish from the female by its size. Males tend to run quite small, generally an inch max. Females are much larger, generally measuring up to 24 inches. When a male and female anglerfish decide they would like to engage in adult activity, things get weird. The male anglerfish will actually bite the female anglerfish and become something called a sexual parasite. Slowly, over time, the male anglerfish will actually fuse with the body of the female until only its reproductive organs remain. Said organs will then fertilize the female, and in just 3 weeks, the mom and what remains of the dad anglerfish will welcome their new babies into the world. Now before we move on, let's take one last look at this female anglerfish, and more specifically the thing coming out of her incredibly bulbous head. That thing is called a stalk, and it is tipped with a bunch of little bioluminescence which the female anglerfish will use to attract prey in the pitch black deep sea, where she resides at an average depth of around 3,000 feet.
The Skaha Lake Monster. Jim LaRoque, a resident of South Okanagan, Canada, stirred quite a buzz about 5 years back with his alleged sighting of the Ogopogo, the mythical lake monster of Okanagan Lake. LaRoque and his children were by Skaha Lake in Caledon, BC on June 1st of 2019 when he noticed a peculiar disturbance in the water. Describing the incident, he stated he heard a whooshing sound and observed ripples on the lake. His son, who is on a paddleboard nearby, reportedly saw a flipper emerge from the water. LaRoque managed to capture footage of what he claimed to be this massive serpentine creature. The footage was so shocking it even showed up on the news. Canadian news, to be fair, not much goes on up here. He estimated it to be about 120 feet long, with 7 fins moving in sync, resembling oars of an upside-down dragon boat. The Ogopogo legend itself has deep roots dating back to the 1700s, with First Nations people sharing tales of this mysterious water creature lurking in the waters of Lake Okanagan.
Alright, this thing looks straight up like it just walked straight out of your nightmare. It's called the Magnapina squid, and it was first recorded by a camera attached to an oil rig in Texas. This is an incredibly elusive animal, and so catching one on film is a major accomplishment. While these squids aren't as big as giant squids, they are incredibly long, with some growing to be more than 20 feet in length. The largest one discovered to date was 21 feet long, but since we have only ever seen a handful of these guys, it's entirely possible that there are some Magnapinas out there 2 or 3 times that size, which really would make them the longest squid in the world. Although, as I said, this guy has only ever been spotted a handful of times before, the fact that it was once spotted at a depth of 20,381 feet makes it the deepest occurring squid genus known to man. And while we don't know exactly what this animal's long appendages are used for, scientists assume they act kind of like fishing lures, grabbing any edible organisms they can while they drag them along the sea floor at a depth that would literally crush you or I. Fascinating.
Coelacanths are incredibly fascinating creatures because they're actually prehistoric animals still swimming around in the ocean to this day. As cool as they are though, they're also kind of creepy looking. They kind of have like zombie looking eyes. What's crazy about them too is that they were actually thought to have gone extinct along with the dinosaurs, but in 1938 they were rediscovered and found to still exist. An animal that was believed to have died out about 65 million years before was actually still around. Pretty cool. These fish are believed to have inhabited the earth for 360 million years, and it shows. They're pretty big, growing sometimes over 6 feet in length. They also seem to be a bit of a missing link between the creatures of the sea and land-dwelling amphibians, because a coelacanth's 4 fins move in a way that almost resembles fore and hind legs.
The fang-toothed fish is generally found at a depth of about 16,404 feet, which has earned it the distinction of deepest fish known to man, and its appearance might just earn it the distinction of most disturbing. But hey, to each their own, right? Although it generally resides in some of the deepest depths known to man or fish, the fang-tooth has been seen at depths of just 6.5 thousand feet, which is where it was first discovered by scientists. Out of the few fang-tooths spotted just far, 6.6 to 7 inches seems to be a pretty standard body size, but again, we've only seen a handful, so they could be way larger than previously assumed, which is a very scary thought. Now, in case you haven't noticed, this thing has massive teeth. In fact, it has the largest teeth to body ratio of any known fish, to the point where the fangtooth is actually physically incapable of shutting its own mouth. In other words, it's a yappa. If you're Gen Z, you get that reference. It's also incredibly fast, with a bite that appears to be way worse than its bark. It's been observed lunging at its prey of shrimp, fish, and squid at incredible speeds, and impaling them on its razor-sharp teeth, chopping them up and swallowing them down in less than a few seconds. Good day to be me, bad day to be a shrimp.
The Humboldt squid has a few nicknames: the jumbo squid, jumbo flying squid. In Peru, they're called pota. They're big and not the friendliest. Pretty freaky squids. For starters, these things have barbed tentacle suckers. Even if you don't know what barbed tentacle suckers are, you just get this sense that they're not good. This is a large predatory squid found in the eastern Pacific Ocean. They have long, powerful tentacles equipped with suckers, each lined with sharp, barbed teeth. The beak of the Humboldt squid is also sharp, allowing them to tear into the flesh of their prey. So they're pretty intimidating as is, but even worse, they travel in large packs. And when I say large, I'm not talking about like 10. These packs can consist of thousands, and they're very coordinated, so they can overwhelm larger prey pretty easily. And just like any nightmarish creature, they only come out at night. At least that's when we're most likely to encounter them. They come closer to the surface at night to feed. During the day, they're found much deeper down. So, moral of the story, don't go swimming around in the eastern Pacific Ocean at night, or you might be swarmed by thousands of barbed tentacled jumbo flying squids.
Residing at a depth of about 1,640 feet, we have the frilled shark, which is, like the coelacanth, considered to be a living fossil due to the fact that its origins date all the way back to the Carboniferous period, which took place between 359 to 299 million years ago. The frill shark is named after its gills, of which it has 6, which each boast a distinctive frilly margin that kind of looks like a decorative trim. But that's not the only thing that sets this deep sea dweller apart from the others. You see, while most sharks have 2 completely separate sets of symmetrical gills on either side of their body, the frilled shark's frontmost gills actually connect underneath its throat. Some other things you might just find interesting about this animal are that, just like the great white shark, this frill shark has 25 rows of razor-sharp, backwards-facing teeth on both its upper and lower jaws. Unlike the great white shark, the frill shark attacks like a snake by lunging at its prey. This gray aquatic dinosaur also has a gestation period of up to 3.5 years. 3.5 years. Seriously, thank God I'm not a frill shark.
Now, we can't do a list like this without mentioning the giant squid. I mean, giant squids are some of the largest invertebrates on Earth. Adults can reach lengths of up to 43 feet, at least from what we've seen. There's still a lot of mystery to these things, and some researchers say they could grow even bigger than that. They live in the deep ocean at depths of 3,000 to 6,500 feet. They're very elusive and live so deep down they're very rarely seen. Giant squids have the largest eyes of any known animal, measuring up to 10 inches in diameter. Their eyes allow them to detect faint traces of bioluminescent light in the deep sea. They have long tentacles equipped with suckers lined with sharp teeth. The 2 long feeding tentacles, along with the 8 shorter arms, help them capture and consume their prey. These things aren't just scary in terms of size either, they're also carnivorous, hunting fish and even other squid species. They've even been known to eat small sharks. What's so amazing about these creatures is that for centuries they were only talked about in stories told by fishermen or sailors. They were treated like any other mythical creature. It isn't until fairly recently that one of these things were actually captured on camera. Because of where they live and how hard they are to catch, studying giant squids is a tough task. Most of our knowledge about them comes from specimens that have washed ashore or from examining stomach contents from creatures that have eaten them. Sperm whales. That's basically the only animal big enough to mess with these things.
And of course, we have to include the goblin shark, a truly unsettling specimen with a protruding mouth that extends outwards to catch its prey. The goblin shark was discovered by scientist David Starr Jordan in 1098, however the species itself is actually believed to be around 125 million years old. The animal boasts 26 long, thin, spiky teeth on their upper jaw and 24 on their lower jaw. The more I learn about this thing, the more I want to stay as far away from it as possible. Lucky for me, this goblin shark is generally seen at depths of 4,265 feet, but unluckily for me, it enjoys late night swims incredibly close to the surface of the water, which I will be keeping in mind the next time I want to take a late night dip in the heart of the Pacific, Atlantic, or Indian Ocean.
Well, this is exciting. This news just came out the other day. In the waters off the Solomon Islands, there is a sea creature so massive it could be seen from space. In fact, it's one of the largest living organisms on Earth, a colossal coral colony. Discovered by a team of researchers and filmmakers, this coral is roughly the size of 2 basketball courts. Unlike most coral reefs, which are made up of different colonies, this one is an individual organism made up of millions of tiny animals called polyps. The species is Pavona clavis, and its size and slow growth suggests it's been around for centuries. Underwater photographer Manu Sanfelix, who first saw it last month, was in awe, saying, quote, "It's a dream to see something unique like this. When Napoleon was alive, this thing was here," end quote. Before this discovery, the largest known coral was in American Samoa, measuring about 22 meters wide, but as marine conservation expert Stacy Jupiter points out, humans have only surveyed about 5% of the planet's marine realm. That means there could still be larger corals hidden out in uncharted waters. What you're looking at here is a newly discovered creature. Again, news about this one just came out the other day. In the Monterey Canyon off California, marine biologist Bruce Robison made a discovery back in 2000. While exploring with robotic vehicles, he came across a strange gelatinous blob with a giant hood, finger-like projections, and colorful internal organs. Fast forward nearly 25 years, and Robison, along with colleague Stephen Haddock, which is a great name for someone who studies fish, they have finally solved the mystery. They've identified this bizarre creature as a brand new type of nudibranch, or sea slug. Now, unlike other sea slugs that crawl along the ocean floor though, this one floats. Looks a lot more like a jellyfish. Even more astonishing, this new nudibranch can jet backward by expelling water from its hood. The hood, as it turns out, is like a Venus flytrap, capable of expanding and contracting to trap its prey. The creature is also bioluminescent and has both male and female reproductive organs. A pretty fascinating little creature. These are recently discovered octopus species. Roughly 2 miles beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean near Costa Rica, scientists found 4 brand new species of octopus during expeditions in June and December of last year. It all started when researchers spotted pink octopus hatchlings coming out from their eggs at a place known as El Dorado Hill. Jorge Cortez Nunez, a researcher from the University of Costa Rica, said it was unexpected to find so many species of octopus in a small area. First, and second, at 3,000 meters depth. In June, researchers using a remotely operated vehicle named Sebastian found 2 octopus nurseries around hydrothermal springs on the sea floor. They discovered that these octopuses seemed to prefer the warm waters from the vents, which helps shorten their long incubation period. The warm water gives the eggs a better chance of surviving in the cold, dark depths. One of the new species was even given an unofficial nickname, the Dorado octopus, after the spot where it was found. The species has short arms and small eyes, similar to the pearl octopus found off California. The other species had bigger eyes and longer arms. The 4th species is especially mysterious, with bumpy pale skin and a strange row of suckers on each arm. In total, about 310 deep-sea octopus specimens were collected. What you're looking at here is a recently discovered species of fish in China. You'll notice that it doesn't have eyes. They kind of look like raw chicken cutlets or something else that I can't really describe on here. And those dark patches that you see, those are its internal organs. Deep in an underground river in southern China, scientists found these blind pink fish with no eyes. They were swimming in the dark depths of a cave system in Guangxi when researchers first encountered them during surveys between 2019 and 2024. They were on the hunt for Chinese karst loaches, but quickly realized that this fish didn't match any known species. After studying it, the team confirmed that they had discovered a new species. This is the overly complicated scientific name on screen now, so I'll use the nickname Dachshund Chinese karst loach. These tiny fish are only about an inch long and have elongated bodies with no scales. They also have wide heads, narrow mouths, and whisker-like thingies on their heads, but again, no eyes. Researchers believe this species, like others in the area, lives in deep caves with underground rivers and is rarely seen by people. In November of last year, anglers off the coast of Pakistan reeled in a strange catch, a quote, torpedo-shaped predator with teeth on its tongue. At first they thought it was a regular fish, but researchers Sherkan Panwara and Imtiaz Kashani soon realized they'd actually found something new. And after examining these fish in the lab, they discovered not one, but 2 new species. The first was Brachycentron blotchy, or the blotchy cobia. These predators are about 3 feet long, weigh around 8 pounds, and have small eyes, pointed snouts, and tiny teeth on their jaws, the roof of their mouths, and yes, even their tongues. Inside their stomachs, they found a mix of small fish, crustaceans, and cephalopods. Second species, Brachycentron marquiensis, or the macron cobia, is smaller, about 2.5 feet long, and weighs about 6 pounds. It has a short, pointed head, small teeth, and a greenish coloring with a gray band running along its side. Its stomach contained mostly digested material and some crab parts. How's this for an animal name? The night-armored catfish. Pretty cool, but does it live up to its name? Well, this is one right here. Divers in northern Brazil were exploring the Xingju River, hoping to find some Asacu preto, a thorny black fish often sold in the aquarium trade. Well, it turns out these fish hadn't been documented by science yet. After teaming up with local fishermen and digging through museum collections, scientists realized that this was a brand new species which they named Pseudacanthicus nictos, or the night-armored catfish. These fish can grow up to 10 inches long and have completely black eyes, forked teeth, and their bodies are covered in armor-like plates and thorny spikes. Living in the murky depths of the river, they're usually found around submerged logs, sometimes as deep as 65 feet. As you could probably tell, they're carnivores, feeding on small aquatic animals. They're also very territorial. The males can get very aggressive, especially when sharing space with other males. Off the coast of Belize, anglers unknowingly caught a new species of shark between 2016 and 2019. First they thought they'd just landed another hammerhead, but something about the shark's unique shovel-shaped heads made scientists take a closer look. And after analyzing the shark's body shape, skeleton, and DNA, researchers realized these were part of a completely new species, the shovelbill shark. These small sharks, measuring up to 3 feet 4 inches long, have these very unique, flat, shovel-looking heads. They're found in coastal waters estuaries, coral reefs, and seagrass beds from Belize all the way to Brazil are often caught by anglers, and experts warn that they may already be highly threatened. As co-author of the study, Demian Chapman said, "It is tragic that we have only just recognized that this species exists, and we are already running against the clock to prevent its extinction." Yeah, that is very sad, especially because these sharks are kind of cute, you know? Off the coast of Saudi Arabia, researchers exploring coral reefs discovered this tiny, really upset-looking fish, and honestly, I think if I looked like this, I would also be in a pretty bad mood all the time. While diving in the Red Sea, they released clove oil into an underwater cave to sedate the fish inside, and a small dark red goby floated to the surface. At first, they weren't sure what species it was, and after several sightings and a few more catches, they figured out why. This was not a species they'd ever seen before. This little fish, only about half an inch long, had a severely curved mouth that gave it this sort of grumpy look. Researchers named it the grumpy dwarf goby because of this permanently unhappy looking facial expression. The fish is incredibly rare, with only 10 specimens found during extensive collections along the Saudi Arabian coast, said the researchers. They live in small caves, rocky overhangs, or crevices about 32 to 100 feet below the surface. Again, in the caves of southern China, researchers discovered a fish which they'd named Liu's cave loach, a new species swimming through heavily polluted water. The creatures caught the attention of scientists visiting the area in 2023. Spelled out for you here is their scientific name, but again, they're also called Liu's cave loach for short. They can grow up to 2.5 inches long. They have elongated bodies covered in tiny scales with bright yellow fins. Their snouts are lined with whiskers, almost like a catfish, and their eyes have a yellowish hue. They live in underground rivers and cave pools, but don't show the usual traits of cave-dwelling species. They were also found breeding in a cave pond, despite the water being heavily polluted from nearby sugar factories and duck farms. So far, Liu's cave loaches have only been found in the caves of Yifeng District, Guangxi, a province in southern China near the Vietnam border. Deep beneath the surface of the ocean, researchers have discovered 3 brand new species of sea stars living in some of the most remote and bizarre environments on Earth. The sea stars were found thousands of feet below the surface at methane seeps in underwater valleys using remote-controlled vehicles during surveys between 2003 and 2018. One of the new species showing up on screen in text right now because I don't have a week to learn how to pronounce that. Anyway, it was discovered off the coast of Costa Rica about 3,200 feet down. With flower-like patterns, small plates on its back, these creatures move along the seafloor using tube feet that extend down each arm. Another species, Chimonostella davidalani, also found in Costa Rica, looks similar but has thorny, elongated spines along the edge of its body. The third species, Chimonostella lorisae, has short spines covered in thick skin, and interestingly, all mature specimens looked identical. These deep sea stars seem to live around stuff that sinks to the bottom of the ocean, like sunken wood, which gives them shelter and food. And researchers still aren't sure if the sea stars eat only the wood or if they have other food sources down there. Well, this thing looks creepy. Earlier this year, a team of researchers from China set out on an expedition to the northwestern Pacific Ocean to explore the depths around the Caroline Plate, an area off the coast of the Philippines. They weren't diving themselves, but instead used an underwater robot to explore the area and collect tiny creatures from the ocean floor. And when the robot pulled up a sample from a seamount, among the tiny critters they found was a pregnant amphipod, a type of shrimp-like creature that's just a few millimeters long. But this wasn't like any amphipod they'd ever seen. This was a brand new species, now been dubbed Esoris carolinus. It's an interesting but again very creepy looking creature. Good thing it's so small. The eyes in particular were noted as being large and very well pigmented, which helped it stand out among the other species that live in these deep waters. And here's the really interesting part. When the researchers looked inside its body, they found 9 baby amphipods growing inside her. This footage here was captured in 2015, a never-before-seen species of squid. So a group of researchers from the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, Geomer Helmholtz Center for Ocean Research Kiel, and the University of South Florida teamed up for an expedition in the Gulf of California off Mexico's west coast. Using a remotely operated vehicle, the team was able to dive as deep as 8,000 feet without ever leaving the surface and without disturbing the creature's environment. The team managed to capture a large squid on camera, but soon they noticed something strange about this one. The squid was carrying dozens of giant eggs, around 30 to 40 of them, each about half an inch across. Now, squids of the species they thought this mother was, called gonatids, usually carry eggs that are only about a fifth of an inch in diameter, so these were much bigger. They'd never seen eggs this large in any gonatid squid before, and there's no other squid known to carry eggs of this size. So the researchers figured there was a very good chance they'd discovered a brand new species altogether. Pictured here is a brand new species of fish found in Africa. Earlier this year in Zambia, a strange creature was spotted swimming through a river, heading straight for a bridge. Scientists pulled the creature from the water, at first having no idea what they just found, while it turned out they discovered a brand new species. The team had been in the middle of a project studying a group of fish called nanocharax, more commonly known as darters. They were looking at preserved specimens collected from rivers in South Africa when something odd started to stand out. The fish from a few specific rivers, mostly caught in 2005, had a distinct pattern that was different from the usual darters they were used to. These fish had a unique scale pattern and a banded coloring that immediately caught the researchers' attention. And after further investigation, they realized that they'd uncovered a completely new species dubbed Nanocharax skeltoni, or Skelton's darter fish. They decided to name the species after Paul Harvey Skelton, a renowned professor at the South African Institute for Aquatic Biodiversity. A study came out this past April about a brand new species of jellyfish discovered off the coast of Florida, pictured here. Peter Schuchert and Richard Collins carried out 91 nighttime scuba dives near Palm Beach over the course of years, and they found some pretty cool stuff, like, just some never before seen jellyfish, for example. After photographing the creatures and capturing 2 of them, they took a closer look and realized they'd found a new species which was soon dubbed Zancleopsis grandis, or the large Zancleopsis jellyfish. These things are just over an inch tall with tentacles stretching more than 2 inches in length. The body itself has a long, narrow shape that shifts as the jellyfish moves through the water. The researchers named it grandis because of the relatively large size and the big bulbs on its tentacles. And just like other jellyfish, Zancleopsis grandis uses jet propulsion to move. It sucks in water and then squirts it back out through a small opening, propelling itself forward through the water. Kinda crazy that these new things were found in Florida. As Collins put it, part of the work we are doing is to demonstrate and document the amazing oceanic biodiversity here in Florida. Florida waters are well studied relative to most of the world's oceans, and yet there is still so much to learn and discover. And yeah, that is crazy because Florida, right? And then you got all this vast water over so much of the earth. Like, who knows what crazy stuff could be out there. Now, this is the first and only piece of footage ever captured of a living genus of squid called this. Just earlier this year, the Schmidt Ocean Institute led a team of oceanographers on an expedition to some of the remotest parts of the southeastern Pacific Ocean. During their month-long mission, they came across 20 never-before-seen species and another 80 that were observed in this part of the ocean for the first time. These squids have only ever been seen on the surface, i.e. they've been brought up in nets, dead. We've never seen one alive swimming around in its natural habitat, so this was pretty amazing to see. And there haven't even been that many specimens of these creatures either. It's such a rare genus that we've only had like a few specimens, and a lot of them came from the late 1800s. Sea cucumbers don't really sound all that scary, but I mean, just look at this one. This is what's called a brown-ringed sea cucumber, and it was just discovered. Scientists on a submarine were exploring the South China Sea when they spotted this small, reddish sea creature. It didn't quite look like anything they'd seen before, and as it turns out, it wasn't anything they'd seen before. It was found during a series of dives between 2018 and 2023, using a manned submersible. When the team surfaced and had a chance to study the creature, which had something like 20 tentacles and over 70 tube feet, they realized that they'd uncovered a new animal and gave it this crazy name that, again, I can't even begin to pronounce. AKA the brown-ringed sea cucumber, though. This new species of sea cucumber can grow to about 8 inches long and around 2 inches wide, and this wasn't all they found either. Yan Lu Zhao and Haibin Zhang, part of the research team, also discovered 2 more new species of sea cucumber on the same expedition. Next up, we have another story that came out this past April about a new creature discovered off the southern tip of China. Just what is this thing? An ancient wood carving? Well, no, it's actually the shell of a living animal. A research team from China was exploring a deep sea area called the Haima Cold Seep off the coast of Hainan Island when their underwater robot picked up something from the sea floor. It was a shell, and at first the researchers didn't really think much of it, but once they took a closer look, they were like, well, actually, what exactly is this thing? The shell belonged to a type of mollusk known for living in extreme environments, like cold seeps. These are special areas on the seafloor where chemicals like methane and hydrogen sulfide leak up from the Earth's crust, creating this chemically rich water that only very specific life forms can survive in. This weird shell was just over 4 inches long and had a, quote, robust and rectangular shape. The mollusk's foot, the part that sticks out from the shell when it wants to move around, was described as large with an oval sole. But it was really the shape of the shell that made this thing so unique. It's the fact that it's rectangular. Other species' shells are usually curved inward on the ends. Just look at how gorgeous this snail is. On the coastlines of Japan, a tiny new species of sea creature has been found. Hiroshi Fukuda, a researcher and associate professor at Okayama University, first came across these rare snails over 30 years ago when he was still a student. They were actually relatively well known in Japan, but had never been formally documented until last year. Fukuda studied dozens of these snails and ended up naming them this. And luckily, it has a much easier to pronounce nickname, the strange dwarf snail. These snails are tiny, measuring less than 1/10 of an inch long, and Fukuda described these snails as bizarre. These things are small, but they move around quickly, crawling in step-like movements. Fukuda wrote in his paper that they're usually found crawling on muddy walls of earthworm and crab burrows, which might be why they were overlooked for such a long time. This strange-looking animal was discovered in an underwater cave. A team of researchers recently discovered a brand new species of hermit crab in a dark underwater cave in Japan, about 100 feet from the entrance. The 3-person team found this tiny critter in just about 3 feet of water. After carefully examining the male specimen, they realized they had come across a new species. This is its name, also called this. Not even the alternate name is easy to say. This new species is incredibly small though, measuring less than 1 centimeter long. Aw, that's cute. What really set it apart from other hermit crabs were its claws. They were described as strongly unequal and dissimilar. The right claw is moderately slender, the left claw is much smaller, only about half the size of the right one. And this last thing looks like it just hurts. There's like little spines and spikes on it. In March of 2021, researchers took a deep dive into the South China Sea using a manned submersible. During one of their dives, they came across a large crab sitting on some coral. They captured the creature and brought it back to study. Until then, this was a never-before documented species, which was later dubbed Gordonopsis mazupo. Finally, a scientific name that I can actually get my lips around. But they're also known as Mazu's porter crab. This new species is considered pretty big for a crab. Its body is about 1.2 inches long, with legs stretching more than 3.5 inches. When you include its legs, the crab measures over 8 inches across in total. Its claws are especially interesting, described as blade-like. The researchers named it Gordonopsis mazupo after Mazu, the Chinese goddess or grandmother of the sea. And so far, only one of these things has ever been found. One of the wildest tales in naval history is the encounter the USS Stein had back in 1978. The ship was cruising in an undisclosed location when suddenly its sonar equipment went down. The crew was startled by the noise feedback, but no one could see what was going on. When they returned to dry dock to figure out what had happened, they found that the sonar dome, located right at the bow of the ship, had been shredded. We're talking about large gashes, some 4 feet long, or about 1.2 meters, that covered about 8% of the dome's surface, and if that wasn't crazy enough, they found these massive teeth or claws embedded in the slash marks. Navy Marine biologist Forrest G. Wood took a look at the evidence and concluded that these were arm hooks from a squid. But here's the thing, the claws were way bigger than any squid parts anyone had ever seen before. C. Scott Johnson, a Navy biophysicist, went a step further and suggested that they were likely dealing with a quote, extremely large species still unknown to science. So what was it? A giant squid? Some other monstrous deep sea creature? What do you think? Let me know down in the comments. The HMS Daedalus has a fascinating story, especially when it comes to the legendary sea serpent sighting back in 1848. Launched as a warship in 1826, it was during one of its voyages to St. Helena that something absolutely wild happened. On August 6th of 1848, Captain McQuay and his crew spotted an enormous creature while navigating between the Cape of Good Hope and St. Helena. They described it as a giant serpent with about 4 feet of its head visible above the water. The captain estimated the entire length to be around 60 feet and said it was dark brown in color with a yellowish white throat. The creature was swimming fast, between 19 and 24 kilometers per hour, and the captain claimed that the creature, quote, passed rapidly, but so close under our lee quarter that, had it been a man of my acquaintance, I should have easily have recognized his features with the naked eye. He wasn't the only one who saw it either. 7 crew members reported seeing the creature for about 20 minutes. One officer also said that it looked more like a lizard than a serpent. Speaking of the sea serpent reportedly seen by the Daedalus, another sea monster was seen that very same year, this time by an American ship. The story of the sighting was detailed in a letter to a Glasgow newspaper, written by James Henderson, captain of the Mary Ann of Glasgow. When clearing out of the port of Lisbon, upon the 30th of September last, we saw the American brig Daphne of Boston. She signals for us to heave to and lay to while the mate boarded us, and handed a packet of letters to be dispatched per first steamer for Boston on our arrival in England. The mate told me that upon the 20th of September, a most extraordinary animal had been seen. It had the appearance of a huge serpent, or snake, with a dragon's head. Immediately upon its being seen, one of the deck guns was brought to bear, which, having been charged with nails and whatever other pieces of iron could be got at the moment, was discharged at the animal. Then, only distant about 40 yards from the ship, it immediately reared its head in the air and plunged violently with its body, showing that the charge had taken effect. It was seen foaming and lashing the water at fearful rate. Upon the brig nearing, however, it disappeared, and though evidently wounded, made rapidly off at the rate of 15 or 16 knots an hour, as was judged from its appearing several times upon the surface. The Daphne pursued for some time, but the night coming on, the master was obliged to put about and continue his voyage. From the description given by the mate, the brute must have been nearly 100 feet long. Captain Henderson went on to write that the creature matched the description of the one seen by Captain McQuay and his crew on the Daedalus. The USS Indianapolis incident is one of the most harrowing shark attack stories in history. This US Navy cruiser was on a mission in 1945 delivering enriched uranium for the atomic bomb Little Boy. After successfully completing that mission, the ship set sail for the Philippines with a crew of 1,195. But just after midnight, a Japanese sub torpedoed the ship. In a matter of minutes, the Indianapolis sank, and 300 sailors went down with her. For the survivors, though, things would only get worse. Around 900 men now found themselves adrift in the vast Pacific with no land in sight. As the wreckage floated and chaos unfolded, the sounds of explosions and splashes attracted hundreds of hungry oceanic white-tipped sharks. Sharks like this here. Just imagine a swarm of these things mauling you as you're stranded out in the middle of nowhere, hanging on to rubble for dear life. The sharks, being drawn by the scent of BLOOD and thrashing bodies, began circling the survivors, and over the next 3.5 days, the sailors would be fighting off these relentless attacks from the sharks, using whatever They could grab life vests, oars, anything to defend themselves, and not only that, but they had dehydration and the fear of drowning to worry about. Some sailors ended up taking their own lives rather than facing the absolute hell that they were in. When rescue finally arrived, only 316 men were left alive out of 900. This has to be the most horrific shark attack story I've ever heard. On April 30th of 1918, Captain Gunther Kretsch and his crew were captured by a British warship. When interrogated, Kretsch would tell the Brits one of the wildest tales in naval history. He told them that his submarine had been attacked by a monstrous sea creature. According to him, the beast had small, deep-set eyes, was covered in horns, and had a mouth full of sharp teeth. He claimed it climbed aboard their U-boat, causing it to take on water. They had no idea what to make of Kretsch's story, but it soon came out that things didn't exactly go the way the Germans said they did. Another German crew member revealed that Kretsch had been unusually cold, insisting on having a heater installed in the office's compartment. This installation required running cabling from the sub through the main hatch, which ended up compromising its seal. When the British ship was spotted, the crew hurriedly shut the hatch and attempted to dive, but because of the faulty hatch, water started rushing into the submarine. So they had to surface, and then the crew had no choice but to surrender. Kretsch was so embarrassed about his mistake that he made up this story about a sea monster just so the British wouldn't see how incompetent he'd been. It's a pretty funny story. During the Cold War, the US Navy faced a strange problem that no one expected. Damage to its Ohio-class submarines, and it turned out that this damage was actually being caused by very little sharks called cookie-cutter sharks. These submarines were some of the largest ever built, after all. They were state-of-the-art, powerful ships, but submarine crews started reporting issues like leaking oil lines, missing chunks from electrical cables, and damaged sonar domes. At first, the Navy suspected the Soviets had something to do with it. Perhaps they'd built some highly advanced weapon that they just weren't picking up, but it turned out that these small sharks were just taking bites out of the subs. Cookie-cutter sharks, also known as cigar sharks, only grow about 16 to 20 inches long. Their feeding method is what gives them their name. They bite circular holes into their prey, leaving behind wounds that look like they were left by a big cookie cutter. Take a look at this dolphin here with a big chunk taken out of it. What you're looking at here was caused by a cookie cutter shark. It looks horrific. These sharks aren't picky eaters, obviously. I mean, they go after all kinds of marine life and even non-edible material, especially any exposed soft areas. When Navy officials realized that these tiny predators were behind the mysterious damage to the submarines, they began installing fiberglass domes around the most vulnerable parts of the subs. How about some creepy sounds at sea? This next story comes from Reddit user Vitamin, who writes, I was US Navy. Pretty sure we heard siren calls somewhere northwest of the Marshall Islands. Was on the smoke deck on 3 separate occasions at night, and anyone who was out there heard what sounded like a distant screech, echoing over the waves. I remember it well because it caused several man overboard scares where we'd all have to go muster to make sure those sounds weren't any of ours. Never actually saw anything, so I rationalized that it could have been some kind of animal or seabird, but it sounded human. But not entirely human. We joked for weeks after we left the region that Ariel, the Little Mermaid, was gonna kill us. This was 2013, but I still remember that sound like it was yesterday. The kind of sound that hits your core like freezing wind does. Not something I'd want to hear again. And then a commenter asked him if it sounded like a woman or a man's screech, and Vitamin replied saying that it was hard to describe, but sounded almost androgynous, a mix of feminine and masculine in the sound, which was also distorted by the eerie echo. During the Vietnam War, a terrifying incident took place involving the USS Maddox. In 1964, tensions were high, and one night the Maddox found itself in a heated confrontation with North Vietnamese torpedo boats. After firing 380 shells and dropping several depth charges, the crew expected to see enemy vessels, but to their confusion, air support reported no sign of any boats. The sonar engineer who was on the Maddox that night told the story to a marine biologist named Todd Newberry in 1966, and he described how radar picked up objects that looked like torpedoes, but they behaved strangely, almost as if they were alive. Newberry had a wild theory. These mysterious radar blips could have actually been pyrosomes. Pyrosomes are marine organisms made up of thousands of tiny individuals that come together to create this large, translucent form. They can grow up to 60 feet long or 18 meters and are bioluminescent, which would explain the reports of bright lights seen that night, which were mistaken for enemy craft. Back in 1976, a torpedo recovery boat was doing some oceanographic research when it snagged something big while dragging a cargo parachute. The crew had no clue what they'd caught, but whatever it was, it put up one heck of a fight. The ship was straining against this powerful creature, but then suddenly everything stopped. The beast had suffocated, accidentally having swallowed part of the chute. The crew pulled the thing aboard, and they couldn't believe their eyes. They had just caught what would later be named a megamouth shark. Yes, later named. This was a creature that had never been seen before this day, and they'd caught it entirely by accident. And it wasn't small either. This monster was about 15 feet long and weighed around 750 pounds. The megamouth shark is rarely ever seen. Since the day it was discovered by this crew back in 1976, it's only been spotted about 100 other times. In 1955, something incredible happened aboard the USS Hale. Commander Vining A. Sherman was called to the bridge to check out something unusual caught on the ship's ramming stem. What he saw was a, quote, monster of gigantic size. He could hardly believe his eyes. The creature had been split in two, with an estimated 40 feet of its body dragging along the port side and another 12 feet hanging off the starboard side. Sherman had seen plenty of sharks, but never one that was over 50 feet long. As they freed the ship from the creature, Sherman took a closer look. He couldn't shake the feeling that this thing was unlike any shark he had ever encountered. He thought it was so large that he could easily sit in its mouth. When they returned to port, Sherman did some research, and he eventually found that the mysterious creature was a whale shark. At that time, sightings of whale sharks were incredibly rare. He spoke to many sailors and fishermen who had heard legends about these massive creatures, but had never actually seen one themselves. And yeah, the thing must have looked like a monster. Take a look at this footage here of one being hauled out of the water.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the mysterious mass. When a mysterious mass washed up on shore in Indonesia, people had a lot of questions. At first, it was rumored to be the corpse of an enormous squid, which, to be fair, really would be quite the sight. Locals were flocking to the area to get a glimpse at this washed up creature, which is said to have been the size of a shipping container. After more examination was done by experts, they got to the bottom of what this creature really was, and it was no squid. No, instead, this creature was actually a whale, a sperm whale to be more specific. Indonesia's Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries explained why this creature looked so far from itself when they explained the gruesome decomposition process. They said, quote, with sperm whales, when they decay, the intestines will come out through the bottom of the throat, which is striped like a pumpkin, and they become curved. So that's gross, but at least it gives us answers to this long-time mystery. In our number 9 spot today, we have Devil Trouble. Over in the Netherlands, this is a discovery that, when it occurred, it shocked all of those who were there to see it. 2 fishermen were the ones that stumbled upon this, and at first they thought they were seeing double. That is because what they found was actually a 2-headed porpoise. Of course, further research was done on this animal because the fishermen knew it was rare, but I don't think they knew just how rare it really was. Experts would go on to later confirm that this was the first case of conjoined twin porpoises ever discovered. In fact, it's so shocking that this happened because it's only the 10th known within the group of sea mammals that they belong to, which is a group that includes whales and dolphins. It truly was quite a remarkable discovery, albeit probably a bit shocking when it first happened. In our number 8 spot today, we have jellyfish. Back in 2017, there was a mega swarm of giant barrel jellyfish that ended up washed along the Welsh coastline. Like, I'm talking about thousands of them, and these creatures can be quite large as well, growing to be about 35 inches in diameter. Many experts were shocked and had explained that they had never seen this many, especially this large before, so it was truly quite the sight to see. Experts explained that the unseasonably warm weather that was seen at the time likely boosted their numbers, and this may explain the mass quantity of them. In terms of how they ended up there, well, they were probably caught up while attempting to migrate. In our number 7 spot today, we have the sea snake. Okay, so rather than after disaster, these creatures kept showing up before disaster, and it had many people thinking that perhaps they were some sort of omen, and I can totally understand why. In the Philippines, before devastating earthquakes would appear, there would be these 10-foot-long creatures being referred to as sea serpents that would be found washing up on the beaches. Listen, if I found a weird, huge sea snake a bunch of times before something bad happened, I would also 100% think that it had some sort of omen. It turns out that these were just oarfish, and no, they're not an omen, and no, they can't predict earthquakes or other natural disasters. In our number 6 spot today, we have isopods. Okay, so you know pill bugs or potato bugs or roly-polies, whatever you want to call them. You know, the gross little bugs? Well, what if I told you that there's a sea creature that looks like them? And then what if I told you that sometimes this sea version grows to be like the size of a puppy? Yeah, a little unnerving and very disgusting, right? These things are actually isopods, and while most don't grow to be that large, one of the largest on record was found washed up in Indonesia. It has been nicknamed giant for obvious reasons and was measured to be about 13 inches long. This discovery, while disgusting, also proved to be quite remarkable as it was the first giant isopod to be found in over a decade. In our number 5 spot today, we have the octopus anomaly. When this creature was found, it almost became someone's meal until its anomaly was realized. It was an octopus, but instead of 8 arms, this one had 9. That's like a Novemopus now. Of course, this led to the question, how does an octopus grow 9 arms? Well, that has to do with their ability to regrow limbs. Like how lizards can regrow tails, octopuses have the ability to regenerate their own arms, but sometimes this process goes a little wonky. It's likely that this octopus at some point had to regrow their arm, and while that was happening, this new arm just sprouted another new one, thus the 9-armed octopus was born. Apparently, these sorts of things can happen over and over again to just one octopus. According to a 1965 study, it is said that this once gave an octopus 90 different arms. So, that's a lot. In our number 4 spot today, we have this unidentified creature. This creature was found on shore after the devastating 2011 tsunami that hit Japan. A survivor of this disaster was the one who found this strange creature, and while at first, from a bit of a distance, it appeared as though it could be like a small whale or something like that, from close up it appeared more like a boulder or a large rock, leaving people completely baffled. In the end, especially because all of the work that experts needed to turn their focus to during this time, whatever was seen by this person wasn't fully looked into, so what it ended up being remains a bit of a mystery. There's a video of the entire ordeal so that you can get a little bit of a closer look. In our number 3 spot today, we have the slickhead. This is a discovery that actually ended up being the moment an entire new species was discovered. Found in Japan, researchers were thrilled when they saw this colossal sea monster and realized that despite the heavily fished area that it came from, no one had ever found this fish before. The fish belonged to a family of fish known as slickheads, which are known for their scale-free heads and gill covers. But unlike other much smaller members of its family, this new find was a beast. The previously known members of this family usually grew to be about 14 inches in length, but this one was a massive 55 inches long and 55 pounds heavy. Another thing about this fish that made it different from its other family members is that while slickheads are usually known for eating plankton and weak swimmers such as jellyfish, this new huge guy had evidence that showed he hunted other fish and was actually quite the predator. Despite this guy and his massive, terrifying look, it was definitely an exciting day for those getting to research this newfound fish. In our number 2 spot today, we have a long journey. After the devastating Japan tsunami that occurred in 2011, for years after, the oceans saw repercussions. Of course, this was also a disaster that carried over to land. Many people died, many homes and businesses were destroyed. I'm not trying to minimize or disregard the impact this tsunami had on humans. This is just a list of creatures, so that's what we're focusing on today. So basically, years after the tsunami, a whole slew of strange creatures started washing up on the shores of the Pacific Northwest and California. Some of these new creatures were even clinging to plastic debris that had been swept out to sea in the disaster. These creatures would continue to arrive year after year. We're talking shellfish, crustaceans, marine worms, sea stars, sponges, and even fish. What was alarming is that they were alive, and while that is great, some of these species are invasive and can totally throw off an entire ecosystem. It truly has been quite a time for research to see how this happened and how it affects both the animals themselves and the new area that they've been washed ashore to. In our number 1 spot today, we have the sea monster. Back in March of 2012, the nightmarish sea monster washed up on South Carolina shores and had people completely confused and stunned. People had truly no idea what it was, and the theories, of course, started swirling. Many people believed it was some sort of never before discovered sea monster, and honestly, I do not blame them. This thing looked weird, creepy, and I would have had no other guesses. It honestly looked like it could have been from Jurassic Park, but in the end, thankfully there are many people out there who know much more than I do, and experts were able to take the wheel and get to the bottom of this mystery. In the end, a local veterinarian was able to determine that this washed up creature was in fact the corpse of a sturgeon that was covered in scut. The reason everyone thought it was a monster is because sturgeons are huge, growing to be 800 pounds and up to 15 feet in length.